Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com.
This is Dave Dotson, creator of the Art of Reading Smoke program and co-author of the newly released Art of Reading Buildings book. And you're listening to the SA Matters radio show with Rich Gassaway. The SA Matters mission is simple. They want to help us see the bad things coming in time to avoid bad outcomes.
Hello, and welcome to episode 103 of the Situational Awareness Matters radio show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence environments. The SA Matters mission is simple: to help you see the bad things coming and time to avoid bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from Columbus, Indiana, where I'm in town to deliver a week-long Company Officer Development Institute program. If you're not familiar with this program, it's a 5-day, no PowerPoint, no book, no BS, no baloney, no theory program. Just best practices that company officers need to succeed. When I'm talking to chiefs and they ask me what the outcome expectations are, I tell them this program is designed to keep personnel issues out of the chief's office by preventing and solving them at the company level, where most of them should be handled anyhow. Unfortunately, many company officers are promoted based on a seniority test, or a seniority list, or a test score, and there's nothing wrong with that, but if they haven't been properly prepared for their new leadership role, there can be lots of things wrong with that. And they can make small problems into really big problems, and even create problems. This program focuses on how to succeed in the firehouse. I'm very proud to say we've delivered 23 week-long Company Officer Development Institute programs for fire departments ranging in all sizes all across America. Hey, if you missed episode 100, you may want to swing back and listen to it. I'm giving away a free copy of the Situational Awareness Matters Volume 3 book. That's a $40 value. So listen to the episode all the way to the end, that's a hint, and learn how to claim your free copy. In today's feature segment, I am really excited to share with you this interview that I had with Captain Eric Dreiman from the Indianapolis Fire Department. Captain Dreiman was then a lieutenant and survived a flashover. I know you're thinking, you don't survive flashovers. Well, he did, but only by luck. You're going to want to hear this amazing story. And be sure to check out the pictures on the show notes page on the SA Matters website. To do that, you go to the SAMatters.com, click on podcasts, and then episode 103. Now, I got to tell you, this is a part one of a two-part interview. The interview was so good, there was nothing that I wanted to edit out of it. So just to keep the show, down to a manageable size, I cut it into two parts. Before I jump into today's feature segment, I would like to take a moment to thank the departments and the organizations that have hosted some of the recent Situational Awareness Matters tour stop events. Your efforts to bring this valuable and powerful training on situational awareness and high-risk, high-consequence decision-making to your members and others in your region are greatly appreciated. Los Angeles County Fire Department, the Fire Officers Conference, the Howard County, Maryland Fire and Rescue Department, Toms River, New Jersey, District Number 2, the Maryland Fire Rescue Institute's National Fire Service Staff and Command Program, the Minnesota State Fire School in Alexandria, the Madison County LAPC in Indiana, the Center for Public Safety Excellence Conference in Orlando, the Community Fire Department in Houston, Texas, the Montgomery County Fire Department in Texas, and where I am now, the Company Officer Development Institute in Columbus, Indiana. If you're interested in joining me for an upcoming Situational Awareness Matters tour stop event, on April 9th, I'll be at the Delaware Volunteer Firefighters Association Conference in Dewey Beach, Delaware, doing a program on generational differences. On April 12th, I will be at the Minnesota Department of Pipeline Safety Conference in Breezy Point, Minnesota, where I'm delivering a keynote address on what is situational awareness and why does it matter. On April 13th, I'll be at the North Metro Fire Department in Broomfield, Colorado. April 14th, the Castle Rock Fire Department in Castle Rock, Colorado. April 19th, the Fire Department Instructors Conference in Indianapolis, where I'm delivering a half-day pre-conference session. April 20th, I'll be at the Texas A&M Forestry Service Agency Staff Retreat in San Antonio, Texas. There I'm doing a half-day on situational awareness and a half-day on leadership. April 23 and 24, another Company Officer Development Institute program. This one's split between weekends. This weekend is going to be in Fort Wayne, Indiana. April 30 and May 1 at the Lebanon Fire District in Lebanon, Oregon. May 3, the Douglas County Fire District number 2 in Roseburg, Oregon. May 4 and 5, the Bend Fire Department in Bend, Oregon. May 11 to 14, the Alabama Fire College is hosting 4 programs, Orange Beach, Trussville, and 2 in Decatur. May 17th, the Red Helmet Fire Training in Rancho Cucamonga, California. May 19th, Fire Nuggets program in San Francisco, California. May 31 and June 1, the Alberta Fire Chiefs Association Conference in Calgary, Alberta. Thank you so much to all those hosts. And here's hoping there'll be a tour stop near you and we'll get a chance to meet up. Earlier this year, I was delivering a program in Southwest Minnesota, and I had an opportunity to stop by and visit my sponsor, Midwest Fire. And I got a chance to sit down and talk to a few of their employees about what separates Midwest Fire from their competitors. Let's listen into a conversation that I had with engineer Tyler LeBrun about the topic of lean manufacturing and how this differentiates Midwest Fire from their competitors. Let's listen in. So Tyler, in a conversation that we had earlier, you mentioned the term lean process or lean manufacturing. And then when we were out on the shop floor, you were like snapping around these Japanese terms that, I guess in the lean manufacturing world means something. What is all this, voodoo magic of lean manufacturing or lean process? What does it mean, and why would a customer even care that you run a lean facility?
Well, one of the big things with lean is it's very focused on the customer. Basically, you look at it as what the customer is willing to pay for. There's waste in our process. There's waste in everybody's process that they have if they own any type of business. And what waste is defined as is anything the customer is not willing to pay for. We had a good example down there of, maybe you've been in some different shops and seen stuff just scattered around everywhere, like maybe a floor jack, like somebody used it and left it right there. Well, now the next time somebody wants to go find that floor jack, if they've got to walk around for 5 or 10 minutes, that's a waste that the customer's not willing to pay for. They don't want our guys to be down here wandering around looking for parts. They want them to be putting things onto their truck, and that stuff is value added. The walking around and stuff that you're not willing to pay for is non-value added. And that's really what drives down and brings us to be able to offer something better to the customer, that we are building a truck more efficiently, which obviously passes savings on to them. We talked about our inventory control system, Kanban, one of those fun Japanese words, that basically allows for a system to be around our parts ordering, that the operators control that they go down, they reach a minimum point, they pull a card, they do that kind of stuff, but the parts are always there for them. Not only are the parts always there, but there's not an excess amount of those parts, which costs us money to carry, which we would then obviously, no doubt, have to pass on to the customer. But by reducing all these costs, getting rid of all the waste, we're really able to better give the customer a more quality truck, faster and possibly at less cost than a competitor.
So everybody here, I assume, has to go through some training to learn how to be part of a lean process manufacturing?
Yep. So there's a couple of different ways that we've done that. There's been some guys that have been able to go out and do actual hands-on training at some seminars or that kind of stuff. We've also gone out and taken tours of some real-world class facilities in the area that we've been lucky enough to have. We also do some mentorship. That's something that I've been able to take my experience and kind of help the guys look at all that kind of stuff. But it really boils down to having having a team that's willing to work together and continuously improve. And that continuous improvement is the big thing, is that we don't have a set goal in mind that we are going to be at X in 2016 and then we're never going to do anything again. Lean is really about continuous improvement and just realizing that you're constantly in the pursuit of perfection. If you're not improving, you're on the decline. So that's really some of the ideas behind that, the continuous improvement, and obviously training the employees.
Well, there you have it, folks. Continuous self-improvement in lean manufacturing. It's what separates Midwest Fire from their competitors. Check them out at MidwestFire.com. Thank you, Sarah Atchison, and all the staff at Midwest Fire for your awesome commitment to improving first responder safety. I sincerely appreciate your support of my mission. Hey, if you're interested in attending an upcoming Situational Awareness Matters tour stop, head over to samatters.com website and click on the blue box on the right side of the homepage labeled Upcoming Event Schedule. There have been more than 500 agencies on 4 continents that have hosted a Situational Awareness Matters tour stop event. Has your agency? No? Please, don't wait until you've had a near miss or a casualty event. Be proactive and get your program scheduled. If you're interested in hosting a Situational Awareness Matters tour stop in 2016 for your department or association, just contact me through the samatters.com website. Click on the Contact Us tab on the top of the homepage and we'll get something set up for you. I should note that I'm actively booking for 2017 programs now, so if you're looking out into the future to 2017, now is the time to secure your date. Here's a tip on how you can host a program at a reduced cost. I schedule many what I call companion programs. These are programs that are on adjoining dates to other programs. So if you see I'm delivering a program within a couple hours of your department and you think you might want to tag along as a companion, contact me. You can save as much as 20% off the program cost for being a companion to an existing program. When you hear me announce the upcoming programs and you hear 2 or 3 or 4 programs in the same state or region, that's what those are. They're companions. All right, let's jump into our feature segment where I'm going to talk with Indianapolis Captain Eric Dreiman about his near-miss experience where he survived a flashover.
It was Sunday, November the 14th, 2010. I was Lieutenant Eric Dreiman. I was assigned to Ladder 19. It's my regular station assignment. Typical Sunday shift at the firehouse. We had a few alarm runs, EMS runs, things like that earlier in the day. Station 19 has an engine and a ladder company assigned to that firehouse. We're also one of the 2 hazardous materials teams for the Indianapolis Fire Department, so we also have 2 hazmat apparatus at our station that we respond with for hazardous materials runs.
Eric, where in the city is Station 19? Just to, if somebody is not familiar with Indianapolis and they're looking at a phase clock, where would it be?
Okay, well we're just outside of the downtown area, so we'd probably be between the 6 and 7 position on the clock from city center, so
okay.
Just a little bit southwest of downtown Indianapolis.
Okay, that helps. Thanks.
Yeah. So engine and ladder 19 are both typically staffed with 4 firefighters. On this particular day, due to some staffing issues that we had in the battalion, my ladder company was only running with 3, so we call that running short rather than the typical 4 firefighters that are assigned. We had myself and one of the other regular firefighters that's assigned to Ladder 19, and we had one firefighter that particular day who was there on overtime. So normally the gentleman that was working with us that day, we don't normally work with him, but we both myself and the other gentleman on the ladder knew him, and so we had a relationship together. So I guess it was about just a few minutes before noon, 11:59, we get dispatched to a report of a residence fire at 651 Holly Avenue. which in relationship to the firehouse is probably, well, definitely less than a half mile, somewhere between a quarter and a half a mile from the firehouse. So we get dispatched. We know we're going to be the first due engine and ladder to the scene there. And as we were pulling out of the station, we had an obvious column of smoke in the sky, so we had a pretty good idea that something was on fire. At that point, we weren't sure what, but having been dispatched as a residence fire, we kind of got into that mode, assuming that we were going to pull up and we were going to have a fire. So it took us about 2 minutes from dispatch, from the time the run went out, to arrive on the scene. And Engine 19, who was housed there with us, they arrived on scene first. Advised they had a one-story residence with heavy fire showing from the rear. The way the house was oriented to the firehouse, the front of the residence actually faced away from the firehouse. So as we were pulling up, we were seeing the seaside, the rear of the residence, so we could see the heavy fire blowing out the back door of the residence and a small window that looked like it probably belonged to a utility or a bathroom. Heavy fire, 10 to 15 feet in the air, heavy black smoke showing from the rear. There was a plug right on the corner, so Engine 19 stopped and caught the hydrant, laid out a 3-inch supply line, which is our standard supply line for a residential fire of this size, a smaller bungalow type house. As they were catching the hydrant, Ladder 19 proceeded past Engine 19, and we parked in the front of the residence. I got off the ladder and completed a 360. Again, the only fire that was showing was from the rear. Made my way back around to the front, A side of the residence, and there was a little porch on the front of the residence, and there was an elderly lady sitting on a little bench, just like she was sitting on the porch on a Sunday morning watching the traffic go by. And it kind of struck me as funny that she's just sitting here and her house is just blazing away in the back. And so I said, "Ma'am, you need to get down off the porch so that we can go in and fight this fire." And I noticed, it was at that point that I noticed she had 2 black streaks coming down from her nostrils. And at that point, it the light went off, and I realized this lady had been in there. She wasn't just sitting on the front porch unaware that her house was on fire. So I asked her, I said, "Is there anyone else in the residence?" And she said, "Yes, I think my son's in there, or I think my son is still inside." So about this time, my partner and I are masking up, and the engine officer came up to the front porch, and his name is Lauren. I said, "Lauren," she thinks her son's still inside. We're going to go ahead in and initiate a search. He said, "No problem. We'll be right behind you." And as we were masking up, the engine crew was stretching their dry hand line up to the porch, getting it flaked out in the yard. I turned back to Lauren as we were proceeding through the door. We put our face pieces on, and I said, "We're going to go right when you guys come in." So he said, "All right, we'll be right behind you." And this house had a storm door on the front of it with a full glass panel running the length of the door, and then it had a solid core wooden door on the interior. So when we made entry, I pushed the wooden door open, and my partner Brian, I sent him to the right to initiate a search, and then I proceeded in after him, and the automatic closer on the storm door pulled the storm door shut. So the solid door, residential door, was open, but you could still see out through the glass through the storm door. So Brian proceeded to initiate his search, and he and I are communicating. And I was a bit concerned about the volume of fire coming out of the rear of the residence, but when we made entry, the smoke conditions were minimal, maybe a foot or two off the ceiling, but it's still very clear. You could see across the room without much trouble. So I'm in the living room communicating with Brian as he's performing the search, making sure that he's staying oriented. I'm checking the living room itself.
Hey, Eric.
Yes.
With the smoke conditions like a foot off the ceiling,
yeah.
Were you guys? And I'm just curious. Were you standing up or crawling?
No, we were down.
Okay, I didn't know with that light smoke condition if you were down or if you were up. Okay, go ahead.
No, we were down.
Okay.
And so Brian went to the right. I had a thermal imaging camera with me and was periodically checking the rear, the areas that were smokier towards the rear of the residence, doing my best to search those areas with my camera to see if I could find this son that this lady had told me was in the residence. About that time, I started to notice. First of all, I'm thinking, "Where's that line?" Because they should be in here by now. And at the same time, I noticed that the fire in the rear of the residence was starting to intensify. And so I'm talking to Brian, and he's continuing to search. I think there was 2 bedrooms. He had finished the first one and had started the second one. And about that time, I noticed that the heat really started to increase. Started to feel like, things are getting close here. We don't have much time left before things are going to go south, and we're going to have to get out of here. And the whole time I'm thinking, well, the line's coming through the door any second, because when we made entry to initiate our search, they were standing on the front porch with the dry line. Just the lieutenant was getting ready to call for water. Mm-hmm. So, I was kind of probably going a little bit longer in there than maybe I would have otherwise, simply because I knew that the line was standing. They were standing on the front porch with the line, and they should be coming through the door any second. Mm-hmm. As I was looking through my camera, at one point I noticed that the temperature bar on the side of the thermal imaging camera had increased quite a bit, and then it was at that point that I started to notice the smoke conditions. They began to change. What was a relatively clear environment for us to be in had gotten much smokier, much hotter, and I at that point had almost made the decision that we were going to back out. And then I noticed my knees starting to get warm, and as I was looking out across the residence towards the rear of the residence to take a look at the fire conditions, I noticed that there were little fingers, or snakes as we call them sometimes, of flame kind of floating in the air just above my head. And anyone who's ever either been in a flashover or been through the flashover chamber itself knows that's a pretty ominous sign that you're dealing with an imminent flashover. So I immediately turned to my right, and I yelled at Brian, and I said, "Brian, we got to go." And at this point, I was probably 8 to 10 feet away from the front door. Brian was probably a similar distance to my right, away from the front door. So I turned around and proceeded straight back to the wall where I knew the door was. At this point, the smoke conditions had gotten to the point where I couldn't see very well at all. I could see my hand in front of my face, maybe out to a foot or two, but visibility had definitely diminished from what it was when we first made entry. And I began to sweep the wall, and for some reason, and I don't know why, probably a little bit of it was just my rush to get out. I had difficulty locating the handle on the door, and just as I located the handle on the door, I started to push it open, and the whole room flashed over. I pushed Brian out ahead of me, and made sure that he got out. And then I essentially tumbled out on top of him. I landed on top of Brian, fortunately we both made it out. The lieutenant on the engine said that when he saw that the room flash, just that split second before we made it exit, he said he thought he had just seen two of his friends die in there, because he saw how bad it was. We rolled out. I was on fire. Brian was on fire. Our turnout gear was flaming up. So the engine crew finally got water. There was a delay with the attack line getting water. But once they finally got it, they got it in time to hose both of us down and put us out. So Brian and I rolled off the porch with a few unsavory four-letter words as we were kind of regathering ourselves. And I asked him, I made sure he was okay. I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm okay." I said, "Are you burned anywhere?" He said, "No, I don't think so." So I felt the same way, probably mostly because of adrenaline at the time, just the whole situation itself. But so we regathered ourselves, picked up our hand tools, and then we proceeded to turn around and go back in and assist the engine crew with fighting the fire and opening up areas of the residence that needed opened up, and then continue our search. Ultimately, there was no one else in the structure. The lady's son had gotten out. I'm not sure how, but he had originally been in the residence when the fire started, but subsequently had exited the structure prior to the fire department's arrival. So
was he not there?
He was there. He was there when the fire started.
No. Was he there when you guys got there?
No, he was not.
So he fled the scene.
He had. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he had fled the scene.
Okay.
And the reason that he fled the scene, we found out ultimately, was because he had a meth lab in the rear of the residence, and that's what actually had started the fire. The meth lab had exploded. Ironically, our engine ended up making a run on him 2 or 3 hours later, when they got called to an alley in a neighborhood near where this fire had occurred for a burned person. And so they ultimately ended up treating this gentleman for the burns that he has sustained at this fire, but it was a few hours later. But he had second and third degree burns to his upper body from where he had been caught in the initial flash or explosion from the meth lab lighting off. Mm-hmm. So then we ended up going back in. I noticed that my right ankle, I could tell that I'd gotten some steam burn or something on my right ankle, because it was really not bothering me to the point where I couldn't function, but it was annoying. I knew it was there. I was in pain on my right ankle. But at the same time, I've gotten minor steam burns before at other fires, other little burns here and there. So I didn't think it was anything too significant. So we proceeded to finish the work that needed to be done in there. Additional crews had subsequently arrived on the scene. We normally get, on a residence fire in Indianapolis, just for a single family residence, we'll get 2 engines and 2 ladders, typically all staffed with 4 people. So, and then we get a squad company and a battalion chief and a safety officer. So, but by this point, there's roughly 20 people on the fire ground that are there to, deal with this situation. So, once the initial fire was knocked down, second truck crew came in, completed the secondary search for us. And then my partner and I made our way out. By that time, we needed air. Our air bottles our vibro alerts were going off on our air bottles. So went outside, and it was at that point that I realized how close we had really come to being significantly injured, if not killed, in there. I took my SCBA off, the gauge that hangs on the front. of my SCBA, my air pressure gauge. The screen on it, the first thing I noticed was that it was jet black with soot. It was just completely covered. I took my air pack off, laid it on the ground to change the bottle. Then I looked down at the base of the bottle, and the gauge next to the hand wheel for the main valve for the bottle, that gauge was completely burnt away. The clear, the clear panel that you can read the pressure through had melted away. The numbers and everything on the inside of the gauge were all burnt away. My helmet was a red fire helmet when I started the day. When I came out, all the paint had been burnt off of it, all the reflective trim. My hood had pretty significant scorch marks all around the exposed areas that weren't either up inside my helmet or down below my collar on my bunker coat. My face piece was melted, the lens itself, the regulator, and then I took my coat off to cool down, and it was at that point when I laid my coat down on the ground that I had a hole burnt in basically where your shoulder blades are on each side of the back of my bunker coat, where the fire gear had done its job, but the outer shell had been heated and burnt to the point where it burned a hole through the outer shell on both shoulders, both shoulder blades. And the only thing that was basically there between me and the outside environment was the inner liner and the vapor barrier. So at this point, I realized that, hey, I probably need to be looked at because, I think the adrenaline was kind of wearing off, and I had started to realize that my ears felt funny, my neck felt funny, those sorts of things. So I went over to one of the other firefighters on the scene, and I said, how do my ears look? Because I had felt them, and I didn't feel, I didn't feel any crispy critter feeling or anything like that, but I didn't have a mirror or anything to look at him. So I asked this guy, I said, how do my ears look? And he said, oh man, he said, yeah, your ears are burnt. He said, we need to get you, you're going to need to go to the hospital. So I ended up getting transported, and my partner that was there, he suffered some minor burns where his turnout coat or his SCBA straps had compressed the bunker gear on the front of his coat. He suffered some contact burns there. He chose not to seek evaluation or treatment. His were relatively minor. My burns ended up being second-degree burns to both ears, the back of my neck. I had one spot on the left side of my face where apparently there was a gap between my Nomex hood and my face piece. I had some second-degree burns there. I had burns on the back of my left hand, and then my ankle. I just had a steam burn there. But so I was pretty lucky. Initially, they didn't know if I would need to be hospitalized or how significant the burns were. We have a pretty good burn unit here in Indianapolis, and after evaluating me, they opted not to hospitalize me, to cut me loose and send me back to the firehouse. I subsequently was sent home for the remainder of the shift by the on-duty safety officer because I had my burns had started to blister. I had bandages on both ears, those sorts of things. Obviously, it's not the kind of thing that you can be making runs when you're in that condition. So I was essentially relieved of duty for the remainder of the day, placed on line of duty injury, and then my partner that was there, he ended up finishing out the rest of the shift. And the other firefighter, the third firefighter that was on the ladder with us, who was driving the ladder that day, the way we operate is we split crews. So the engineer, chauffeur for the ladder, his responsibilities were exterior ladder company functions like horizontal ventilation, securing utilities, forcing the rear door if it's needed, laddering the structure when it's needed, those sorts of things. So he never was inside with us during the initial search when the flashover occurred. Once his exterior duties were completed, he then came inside with us and assisted us with overhaul. and finishing up the primary search. So he was fortunate that he wasn't in there with us, because if he had been, he probably would have ended up in a similar state to Brian and myself. Mm-hmm. So
let me ask you a couple questions.
Yeah.
The time from your entry, in other words, you crossed from the threshold from the outside to the inside, until the flashover actually occurred, about how long would you estimate that?
Well, I've thought about that quite a bit over the last 5+ years, and the best I can guess is probably between a minute and a minute and a half from the time we made entry until the flashover occurred.
Okay, so when the engine was delayed in getting water, we're not talking a 5-minute delay here. We're talking seconds to a minute.
Correct.
Which,
yes.
in the scheme of getting water to a hose line, is a minuscule amount of time. There was not some big delay here. It was just a minor half-minute to 1 minute difference there.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. The next question I have for you is what specifically were the triggers, if you can remember, what specifically were the triggers when you guys were in there that compelled you to turn to Brian and say, we're leaving? Well, because you're on a search, so that's not an easy thing to do on a search, is to turn to your partner and say, tap him on the shoulder and say, we are now abandoning the search for the victim, and we are in full bore save ourselves survival mode. And I'm sure you probably didn't use those words, but that's probably similar to what's going through your mind. So what was it that triggered this, that caused you to? That's a hard decision to make. I mean, you had to make one of the toughest decisions that we make, and that is, it's time to save ourselves. So talk me through that.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, the defining point for me was when I started to see those little fingers of, basically just, if you just imagine, for those people who have been through the flashover chamber, they know what I'm talking about, or witnessed a flashover, but just little strips or fingers of flame just suspended in midair, floating through the air, not attached to anything. That's basically, the fire gases inside the structure have reached their ignition temperature, and they're spontaneously lighting off. That was ultimately what made me decide that we needed to go.
Wow, he's in a tight spot. Remember, this is a 2-part interview, so we're going to wrap up this episode, and then we'll come back next week with the second part of Captain Dreiman. I know he said Lieutenant Dreiman. He was a lieutenant at the time of the call, but he's captain now, with part 2 of his interview. Hey, if you missed episode 101, you're going to want to swing back and listen to that. I interviewed 4 firefighters from the Sioux Falls Fire Department, where they had a near-miss event when Truck 7 came in contact with a 33 kV electric transmission line. That episode has quickly become one of the most downloaded shows. If you have experienced or witnessed a near miss and would like to have a platform to share your lessons learned with others, contact me by visiting the SAMatters.com site and clicking on the Contact Us link on the top of the homepage. Think about it for a minute. The lessons that you learned from your near-miss event, like Captain Dreiman is sharing here, could save the life of another firefighter, like his is going to. If you want to share your experiences, contact me. If you haven't subscribed to the SA Matters radio podcast yet, please consider taking a moment and going to iTunes or Stitcher Radio. And while you're there, consider leaving some feedback for me about the show. If you like it, give it a 5-star review. It's really important because this inspires me to work harder for you. A lot of time goes into producing and recording and editing and lining up guests, and your feedback really gives me some enthusiasm for continuing the show. In case you didn't know, I've written 3 books on situational awareness. The 3 volumes, Situational Awareness Matters, Volumes 1, 2, and 3, contain critical lessons for improving situational awareness for when you're operating in environments that are high risk and high consequence. If you want a copy, you can buy one here at samatters.com, or you can go to Amazon. I recently added a donate button to the bottom of the SA Matters homepage. If you're interested in supporting this mission, please consider making a one-time or recurring donation. All the proceeds are invested back into content creation and all the support that goes into supporting that content, website, hosting, marketing, email list management. There's quite a bit of expenses that are kind of out of view from those who are able to enjoy the content, but on the back end it can get pretty pricey. So if you want to support the mission, consider going over and making a donation. Just scroll to the very bottom of the samatters.com web page, and thank you very much for that support. If you're not a member of the SA Matters community of learners, please consider joining. There are more than 5,000 members connected here on SA Matters, sharing ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to train members on how to be critical thinkers and resilient problem solvers. Membership is free, and when you sign up, I'll send you a special report I've created for the new members called 25 Best Practices for Improving First Responder Safety. If you're not a member yet, head over to the SA Matters website and click on the red box on the right side of the homepage that says Free Membership. If you want to get connected with me on social media, you can follow me on Twitter at Rich Gassaway or at SA Matters, either one. The SA Matters Twitter community is almost 17,000 followers of our mission there, and thanks for everybody who's coming along for the ride on Twitter. You can also get connected on Facebook, joining our private SA Matters Facebook page. It's free too. To do that, go to facebook.com/groups/SA Matters. There's an enticement there. There's a 50% discount coupon or code for the newest book, SA Matters Volume 3. That'll save you $20. On LinkedIn, you can find me by searching Rich Gassaway. That's it. Episode 103 is complete. Be sure to check back for episode 104 in the second part of the interview with Captain Eric Dreiman and his very, very near miss when he gets caught in a flashover in this residential dwelling that you had heard about earlier in the show. Thank you to our podcast sponsor, Midwest Fire. Thank you to all of our live event hosts. And thank you, our listeners, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really, really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there. And may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit samatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.